Hey, welcome back, creepy crew. So glad you're here. Genuinely. And listen, I've been sitting on today's stories for a while now, and I had to get them out. Because these are something else. We're talking scary, we're talking deeply unsettling, and a couple of them honestly kept me up way longer than I'd like to admit. So if you're new here, hi, welcome. You picked a great time to show up. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video, it seriously helps more than you know. And if you've got your own scary story you want me to cover, leave it in the comments below. I read every single one. Alright, enough from me. Grab whatever you're drinking, get comfortable, and let's get into it. I didn't charge her for the coffee, even though I saw the cash in her hand. Maybe it was the bruises on her wrists when she reached for her wallet, or maybe it was how her fingers shook. I work night shifts at a gas station off the interstate, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and you get used to weird people. But this woman looked like she'd just left some corporate dinner party. White blouse, pencil skirt, heels. I put my hand on the panic button under the register immediately. She stood by the entrance staring at the chip aisle like she'd never seen food before. And when I asked if she needed help, she didn't answer for a solid 5 seconds. Then she said in this weirdly calm, almost businesslike voice, "Can I use your phone? I need to call the police." People come in asking to use the bathroom, the air pump, to break a 20, not to call the cops. I asked if she was okay, if she was hurt, if somebody was following her. She just blinked slow and said, "Police, please. I don't have my phone." I told her, yeah, of course, just give me a second. I looked around the store first, checked the bathroom door, glanced at the clock. No other customers, no trucks at the diesel bays, just quiet hum and her breathing a little too fast. I just stared at her. Asked if she was sick, if she needed an ambulance, but she shook her head. No, just police. But first, can I get coffee? Large, black. She pointed to the machine in the corner and pulled out a crumpled 20 from her purse. That's when I saw them clearly. The dark marks on both wrists, old bruises turning that yellowish-green color around the edges. I poured the coffee but didn't take her money, just felt like the right thing to do. She walked over to the counter to grab a lid, and I could see a faint red line across her neck, like from a tight necklace or somebody's hand. She didn't seem to notice me noticing. She sat down at one of those plastic tables by the window, wrapped both hands around the cup, and said quietly, "You can call now." I dialed 911, and the dispatcher asked the standard questions. Address, description, is there a weapon? What's the threat? I honestly said there didn't seem to be any threat. The woman was calm, asking for police herself, but wouldn't explain why. The dispatcher paused, then promised to send a unit. The woman drank her coffee very slowly, very carefully, like it was some kind of ritual she needed to complete. I tried to act normal, wiped down the already clean counter, pretended to stock gum. Every time the door chimed, I flinched, but it never opened. Her car was still sitting there running at pump 3. At one point, I asked if she wanted me to shut it off for her, and she just said, "No, it's fine," without looking up. She never checked the window to see if someone was coming in after her, which somehow made me more nervous. She finished about half the cup, set it down, picked it back up, like she was buying time but didn't know how to fill it. After about 15 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore and asked if she was okay. She looked up at me, and for the first time her expression changed slightly. "I called my lawyer an hour ago. He told me to calm down, collect my thoughts before I turn myself in. Your gas station was halfway to the station." That's when it clicked for me. She was driving to turn herself in. My mouth went dry. I just nodded and went back to the register because it felt safer with the counter between us. The blue lights appeared maybe 5 minutes later. She stood up, smoothed down her skirt, and walked over to me. She smiled for the first time that night, sad but genuine. "Thank you for the coffee. You're kind." Then she walked out to the patrol car on her own. Through the window, I watched the officers talking to her, watched one of them carefully put handcuffs on her, in front, not behind her back, watched the other reading something from a paper, probably her rights. She nodded, answered calmly. Then she got in the back seat, and they drove away without sirens. When the taillights disappeared, the store felt weirdly empty, even though she'd barely said anything. I walked a slow lap through the aisles, pretending to straighten things that were already straight, just to make sure no one else had slipped in while I was focused on her. The rest of that shift I went through the motions, but my head kept going back to her hands around that cup, the way she said, "turn myself in," like she was talking about dropping off dry cleaning. I replayed every second, trying to remember if she had blood on her clothes, if there was anything on her shoes, anything that screamed crime. There was nothing, just that line on her neck and the bruises on her wrists. A couple of regulars came through for cigarettes and energy drinks, and I kept almost saying, "You won't believe what just happened." But I stopped myself. Turning her into a story while she was probably sitting in a holding cell somewhere felt wrong. By the time the sky started to lighten, I'd basically convinced myself I was overreacting, that maybe it was some white-collar thing and the bruises were old, from something else. People with money talk to lawyers before they talk to cops, right? Maybe she'd embezzled. Maybe she'd hit someone with her car weeks ago and fled. My brain went through every crime show scenario I'd ever seen. Still, every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way she exhaled when I said I'd call 911, like she'd handed something heavy over and didn't have to carry it alone anymore. I didn't hear anything for a week. Life slipped back into the usual routine. Lottery tickets, coffee, truckers trying to flirt for discounts, the same 3 songs on the radio. I started to think the cops hadn't even written anything up yet, that whatever she'd done wasn't big enough to make the news. Then one night on break, my shift partner Luis came out of the back room holding his phone, saying my name in that drawn-out way that means something's up. "Hey, isn't this your lady?" he asked, sliding the phone across the counter. On the screen was a local news article. Woman from a neighboring town arrested for a serious attack on her ex-husband that night. The photo matched. Same suit, same hairstyle, even the same tired eyes. The article was brief, just a couple of paragraphs. Multiple years of domestic violence allegations. Incident occurred Wednesday evening. Suspect turned herself in voluntarily after the incident. Details weren't released since the case was ongoing. Luis whistled under his breath and said something about crazy rich people, but I just kept reading those lines over and over, my stomach tight. The timestamp on the article matched our shift almost exactly, down to the hour. That was the moment it hit me that I'd been the halfway point between whatever happened in that house and the police station. I couldn't let it go, so I started searching more when the station was quiet and nobody was inside. I typed her name into every site I could think of until I found a support forum for domestic violence survivors, where people were discussing her case in this long thread. Some of the users claimed to know her or know someone from her job. They wrote that for years he'd been threatening her, blackmailing her with photos and money, that she'd ended up in the hospital once with stress-related injuries because she wouldn't tell the doctors what really happened. According to them, that night he came back again, showed up at her place after some event, grabbed her, and she finally snapped and fought back harder than she ever had before. I don't know if that's true or just gossip from people who want a neat story, but the bruises on her wrists were real, and that mark on her neck didn't look like an accident. Sometimes I think about her smile before she got in that car. There was relief in it, like the worst part was already over for her the second those blue lights showed up. She could have screamed at me, tried to take my car, hurt me too. Who knows what anyone is capable of on a night like that? But all she wanted was black coffee and a quiet place to sit while she waited for her life to change. I still work that same shift, and every time someone orders black coffee at midnight and wraps their hands around the cup like it's the only solid thing they have, I remember that woman in the business suit and her shaking fingers, and I wonder if she got the help she needed, or if she's still somewhere counting the days for one bad night when she finally fought back.
She asked for the police first, then she asked for coffee, in that order. Think about that for a second. She'd just come from whatever happened in that house. She'd already called her lawyer. She knew exactly what she was walking into. And the first thing she said was, "Police, please." And then she sat down and wrapped both hands around that cup like it was an anchor. The bruises were old, turning that yellowish green. The mark on her neck didn't look like a necklace. She never once checked the window, because she already knew nobody was coming for her. She was the one who made the call. And when the blue lights finally showed up, he says it himself. There was relief in that smile, like the worst part was already over.
I'm staring at the orange cat curled up on my couch right now, and I know with absolute certainty, this is not Marley. My neighbor Patricia asked me to watch her cat 3 weeks ago while she visited her daughter in Portland. I said yes, even though I'm not a cat person. Patricia helped me move in last year, so I figured the least I could do was make sure her pet didn't starve. Marley was this big, lazy orange cat with faded fur and a round white patch on his chest, always half asleep on the windowsill. She left me a 2-page list about feeding times, water, litter box cleaning, all very organized, like a discharge summary. The first 3 days were boring in a good way. I came home after my nursing shifts, filled his bowl, scooped the litter, and he ate, used the box, and went right back to sleep. On day 4, I came home after a night shift around 8 in the morning and stopped in the doorway. My living room armchair was shredded. Not a few claw marks. The fabric was hanging in strings, stuffing out like someone had taken a knife to it. Patricia had specifically told me Marley was too lazy to scratch furniture, said he, just like soft things and naps. I stood there with my bag still on my shoulder, trying to talk myself down. Maybe he got scared by something outside. Maybe she'd lied a little because she was embarrassed. I didn't want to be the neighbor who called her friend on vacation to complain about scratches, so I let it go. Until he refused his food. Patricia had left expensive organic chicken stuff, labeled containers stacked in my fridge. Suddenly he wouldn't touch it. He'd sniff the bowl, make this annoyed, almost offended sound, and walk off. What he wanted was my food, specifically meat. If I warmed up leftovers, he parked himself under my chair and stared. Not in a cute, begging way, just a fixed, unblinking stare that made me weirdly nervous. One night I made a steak, and as soon as the pan started sizzling, he jumped up on the counter and lunged at it, claws out, like he didn't care he'd burn himself. I yelled and shoved him away with my forearm. He came right back, hissing at me like I'd taken something from him. I ended up shutting him in the bathroom so I could eat without him clawing at my plate. The next day I cut my finger opening a can, just a small slice, nothing dramatic. I turned on the tap and suddenly he was there. I didn't even hear him jump down. 1 second I'm alone at the sink. The next he's on the counter grabbing my wrist with both paws. He started licking the blood from my hand like it was the only thing that mattered. Not gentle licking either. His tongue was scraping over the cut so hard it hurt. I tried to pull back. He dug his claws in and kept trying to get at the wound, eyes fixed on it. I literally had to shake him off. After I got a bandage on, my hands were shaking way more than they should for a tiny cut. The Marley I knew was lazy and kind of oblivious. This felt predatory. That's when I really looked at him. The white patch on his chest was wrong. Marley's had been a round spot. This one was stretched out, more like a crooked stripe. The fur color was off by just a little, darker around the back. And the eyes, I remembered warm amber eyes in the pictures Patricia had texted me when she first adopted him. This cat's eyes were yellow-green, bright and sharp, with this constant focused gleam. I pulled up old photos on my phone and zoomed in on everything: face, chest, tail. In the photos, his ears looked smaller, his tail longer and fluffier. The more I compared, the more my stomach dropped. This is definitely not the same cat. Then the practical part of my brain kicked in. How? The door is always locked, windows shut. I live on the 3rd floor, no fire escape, no balcony neighbors could climb across. Patricia handed me Marley herself in his carrier the morning she left, stood in my doorway, kissed his head, and walked away with her suitcase. I hadn't had anyone over except my brother once, and he hates cats. There was no scenario that made sense, and that actually made it worse. I kept telling myself I was exhausted from back-to-back shifts, that maybe I was misremembering details, that fur can change. But every time this cat stared at me, I felt like I wasn't the one in control of the situation. That night, while I was folding scrubs on the couch, my phone rang. It was Mark from across the street. We're friendly in that wave and borrow jumper cables way, nothing more. He sounded casual at first, then unsure. "Hey, weird question," he said, "but I saw last night. Some woman came out of your place with a cat carrier. Did your friend pick him up early?" I felt cold all at once. I told him no, nobody had been here, and all my doors were locked. He went quiet for a second and said, maybe he mixed up the houses, apologized, and got off the phone fast. I walked around and checked every lock anyway. The cat sat on the back of the couch watching me, tail flicking, totally calm. I tried calling Patricia right after. All I got was a recorded voice. Subscriber out of service area. She'd warned me reception would be bad in the mountains, so I tried not to panic. I sent a text anyway, something normal like, "Marley's fine," and watched it bounce back as, "not delivered." The next morning, I had a day off, so I drove over to her house. My key didn't work. The lock had been changed. Her car was gone. Every curtain and every window was pulled tight. Standing on her porch, it didn't feel like a house someone had left for a trip. It felt like a house someone had sealed up. Back in my car, I called the non-emergency police line and tried to explain. The wrong cat in my apartment, my neighbor unreachable, locks changed. The woman on the phone was polite, but I could hear the distance in her voice. Without signs of a break-in, and without a family member reporting Patricia missing, there wasn't much they could do. They'd make a note. I hung up feeling stupid, sitting there bleeding slowly through an old bandage, thinking about the animal pacing around my apartment that might not even legally exist. On the drive back, I decided at least I could check the microchip. Patricia told me she'd had Marley chipped when she adopted him. If the number didn't match her paperwork, that was something real, something I could put in front of an officer without sounding like I'd lost my mind. I stopped at a pet store, bought a carrier, and brought it home, setting it open in the living room. The cat came over, sniffed it, then looked at me. Not scared. More like he just understood the plan. When I tried to pick him up and guide him inside, he went from still to violent in a second. My hands were under his belly and suddenly he was twisting, hissing, claws tearing into my arms. He launched at my face and I stumbled back into the hallway wall. Then he chased me, actually chased me, down the hall, swiping at my legs, making this deep growling sound I didn't know cats could make. There was no fear in his eyes, no panic, just pure aggression, like hurting me was the whole point. I bolted into my bedroom and slammed the door. He hit the other side hard enough that the frame shook once, then stopped. I sat on the floor with my back against the door, phone in my hand, bleeding through my sleeves, trying to decide if calling 911 for an out-of-control cat would get me help or an eye roll. In the end, I cleaned my arms in the ensuite bathroom, dragged my dresser in front of the door for good measure, and lay down still in my scrubs, shoes on. I must have drifted off in little pieces, because for several nights after that, I woke up to scratching at the door, methodical, persistent, for hours. I stopped leaving the bedroom at night. The first couple of nights I tried it, cracking the door to hit the bathroom or grab clothes. But after the third time he rushed me, claws out. I quit. Now when the sun goes down, I close the door, turn the lock, and drag the dresser back in front of it. Every time I do it, I feel ridiculous, like I'm acting out some bad joke about being scared of cats. But the scabs on my arms tug when I move. It's a physical reminder he already treated me like prey. During the day, he sits outside my door and stares. That's all he does. No meowing, no rubbing, just a shape on the other side and a shadow under the gap. When I open it an inch to slide out a trash bag, he's right there, body low, tail twitching once like he's deciding what to do. He doesn't flinch when I yell or kick the door. Yesterday, I watched from the bedroom window as he slipped through the little flap in the kitchen door and took down 2 birds in minutes, tearing them apart like it was nothing. Feeding him turned into a drill. I fill the bowl, take a breath, yank the door open, throw the food into the hall, and slam it shut before he can spin around. I hear claws hit the wood every time. Yesterday morning, I finally stepped into the yard while he was busy eating. Under Patricia's rose bushes, the dirt looked wrong, churned up in a long, uneven strip, like someone had dug there recently and patted it down fast. My hands shook when I called the police again. This time they agreed to come tomorrow with cadaver dogs. The officer asked if I was alone and if I felt safe, and I lied. I don't know whose cat is living in my house. I don't know where the real Marley is, or what happened to Patricia. I keep seeing her standing in my doorway with the carrier that morning, smiling, trusting me with her pet like this was the safest place. Somewhere between that moment and now, someone came into my locked home and swapped one orange cat for another. I have no idea why anyone would do that. But I do know every time I underestimate this cat, I end up bleeding, and that makes the rest of it feel very real. I keep thinking about that woman Mark saw leaving with the carrier. Who was she? And how did she get in if the doors were locked and the windows shut? Did Patricia give her a key? Or did she watch me leave and pick the lock like it was nothing? What did she do with Marley after she walked off my porch? I wish I'd listened to my brother about cameras. It seemed paranoid. The police are coming tomorrow morning at 9. Right now it's 3 in the morning and I'm on my bed typing this, listening to him settle on the other side of the door. He isn't scratching now. His shadow a solid bar under the frame. I haven't slept in 4 days. I doze for a few minutes and jerk awake, convinced the dresser has shifted and he's inside the room. Part of me is terrified the dogs will hit on something under those roses and prove there's a body there. The other part is scared they'll find nothing, and it'll still be me, this house, and this thing that looks like a cat but isn't.
He's a nurse. He works night shifts. He's seen things. He's trained to stay calm and assess. And he ended up barricading himself in his bedroom with a dresser pushed against the door because of a cat. Except, it's not a cat. Not the right one anyway. Someone walked into a locked apartment on the 3rd floor with no fire escape, no balcony, swapped one orange cat for another, and walked back out. And the neighbors saw her do it. Then Patricia's locks changed, car gone, curtains sealed, texts not delivered, and under the rose bushes, the dirt looked wrong, churned up in a long uneven strip. He's lying on his bed at 3 a.m., not sleeping, listening to the shadow under his door, waiting for morning. The cadaver dogs are coming at 9. Part of him is terrified they'll find something. The other part is scared they won't.
So this happened about a year ago, right after I moved to this small town for work. I just started at an insurance office and barely knew anyone, so I was overcompensating by acting like nothing scared me. Everyone kept talking about the old psychiatric hospital on Oakwood Hill. It got shut down in the 80s after some abuse scandal and just sat there rotting. Teenagers broke in on weekends, filmed terrible phone videos, bragged about hearing screams. Every older person said the same thing. Only idiots went up there at night. I was 24, broke, and my car was about to die. On Halloween, my co-workers were trading hospital stories in the break room, lights off, fake spooky mood, and I kept saying it was just an empty building. Brad from sales finally goes, "If you're so brave, spend the night there. $800 if you last until 6 a.m. $800 was almost exactly what my mechanic had quoted, so after about 30 seconds of thinking about bus rides and maybe losing my job, I said yes. Brad wanted me to go on Halloween night, but I didn't feel like dealing with drunk kids, so we picked November 1st. Around 11 p.m., he and 3 of his friends drove me up there, blasting music like it was funny. At the gate, he killed the engine, looked back at me and said, "6 a.m., I swear. If you leave early, no money." I had a backpack with water, snacks, a thermos of coffee, a book, and 2 flashlights. I watched their taillights vanish down the hill, then went in through a side door that had been kicked in years ago. The first floor was classic abandoned building stuff. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, mold, graffiti. I found a little office with an intact door and a lock that still worked. Rolled out my sleeping bag behind the desk, texted Brad a picture as proof, and tried to treat it like a long, boring night shift. For almost 2 hours, that's all it was. I read, drank coffee, checked the time, and listened to the building creak. A little after 1, I heard footsteps overhead. Not random pops or pipes. Steady steps crossing the ceiling above me. I sat there holding my book, telling myself it was Brad trying to scare me, waiting for him to bang on the door and yell. Nothing. The steps faded, then came back, farther away. Curiosity beat fear. I took my main flashlight, slipped into the hallway, and went up to the 2nd floor. It was a long corridor with rooms on both sides. Most were empty, just trash and broken furniture. Then I found one that looked different. 2 rolled-up sleeping bags, fast food bags, cigarette butts mashed into a plastic lid, a couple of empty beer bottles. The air smelled like stale smoke, not dust. Someone had been staying here. Up until that second, I'd been thinking about ghosts and pranks. Suddenly, I was thinking about whoever slept in those bags walking in and seeing me. I backed out, went straight downstairs, shut the office door, locked it, and dragged a metal filing cabinet in front of it. I sat on my sleeping bag with my back to the wall, typed a text to Brad telling him to come get me, then pictured him drunk on that hill and deleted it. If these were squatters, I told myself, they'd stay upstairs and sleep. I'd stay awake, keep the light off, ride it out. Around 3 a.m., I must have dozed off, because I jerked awake to a metal crash in the hallway. Then it went quiet, until male voices started below, moving closer. I cracked the lock and opened the door an inch. At end of the corridor, the stairwell lit with 2 flashlight beams as 2 men came up. They walked past my office talking about merchandise and a deal, and one of them said, "Everything's ready in the basement. They'll deliver at 5. Now, when I replay that night, I remember staying frozen in the corner, listening to their footsteps go down the stairs, hearing them below, moving through the building, checking rooms. Someone grabbed the office door handle and I froze, actually stopped breathing. The metal rattled, the chair scraped a little, but the door didn't move. Whoever was outside tried the handle again, harder this time, and I watched it twitch like it could pop any second. He muttered something I couldn't make out, then said, "Locked," and let go. His footsteps moved away down the corridor. I stayed curled in the corner, knees to my chest, fingers hurting from how hard I was gripping the sleeping bag. Time turned weird after that. I kept checking my phone like it would change what was happening. Around 4:30, the noises above me stopped. No more walking around, no doors. I could still hear voices from below, from the basement side, but nothing in the hallway anymore. Every tiny sound made me think they'd come back to my door. I thought about texting Brad to come early, but there was no signal in that room, and I didn't want my screen lighting up if someone passed by. The only plan that made any sense was to wait until it started getting light. So I just sat there, counting out slow minutes in my head, taking tiny sips of cold coffee to stay awake. At some point, I noticed the small high window getting less dark. My phone said 5:30. That was it. I crawled to the door, moved the chair and the cabinet a little at a time so they wouldn't scrape the floor, and put my ear to the wood. Nothing. My hand was shaking so bad I had to use both hands to turn the lock. I opened the door a few inches and looked out. The corridor was empty. I could hear the men downstairs now, their voices echoing up from deeper in the building, like they were in the basement rooms. I stepped out, closed the door carefully so it wouldn't click too loud, and walked toward the stairs on the balls of my feet. When I hit the main hallway that led straight to the exit, I stopped caring about noise and just ran. I pushed through the outer doors and kept going, straight down the road away from the hospital. I didn't look back. There were trees along the side, and I kept brushing against branches, scratching my arms, but I just wanted distance. When I finally checked my phone again, it said 5:40. Brad wasn't there yet, and there was no way I was waiting at the gate like a target, so I just kept walking fast down the road in the direction of town. I'd gone maybe a kilometer when I saw headlights coming toward me. I waved both arms, and the car braked hard. Brad leaned out the window with this big grin, starting to say something about ghosts, and then he saw my face and the state I was in, and shut up. I yanked the back door open, got in, and told him to drive. They kept asking what happened, and it came out in fragments at first. Voices, footsteps, merchandise, deal, the guy trying the door, the line about the basement being ready at 5. Brad's friend in the passenger seat laughed and said it was probably just squatters or junkies scaring each other. But Brad was looking at me in the rearview mirror, and he could tell this wasn't me playing something up. When I repeated exactly what I'd heard about a delivery, his face changed. He pulled into a gas station parking lot as soon as we hit town and said, "We're calling the cops, now." I didn't even argue. My hands were still shaking when I handed my phone to the dispatcher. The police went up to the hospital about 40 minutes later. Brad drove me home while they headed out there. A detective called him that afternoon and then spoke to me directly. The men were gone, but in the basement they'd found gas canisters, chemical containers, glassware, burners, all of it set up for meth production. Some of it was half-boxed like someone had packed in a hurry. The detective later explained they'd put motion sensors on the access roads feeding alerts to their phones, so when the police car turned onto Oakwood Hill, the lab guys had a warning and time to get out. About a week later, they arrested 3 people tied to the operation. Same detective told me I was lucky whoever grabbed that door handle hadn't tried harder, because those guys were armed and had a record for violence. Brad paid me the $800 anyway and joked I'd earned hazard pay, but I don't take bets anymore, and I don't go anywhere near abandoned buildings. Every now and then my brain starts replaying that night, and I picture that handle turning all the way, or me opening the wrong door on the wrong floor, and I have to force myself to think about something else because nothing I got out of that night was worth how close I came to not walking out at all.
$800. That's what this cost. $800 and a conversation in a break room on Halloween. He had a book, a thermos, 2 flashlights. He was ready for ghosts. He was not ready for 2 men with flashlights talking about merchandise and a delivery at 5. He heard them through the door, heard the handle turn, watched it twitch, and then locked, and the footsteps moved away. That's the whole margin. A filing cabinet dragged across a floor on a lock that still worked. The detective told him later, those guys were armed and had a record for violence. If that handle had held for 1 more second, if whoever was on the other side had pushed a little harder, there's no story here. Brad paid him the $800 anyway, called it hazard pay. He doesn't take bets anymore.